in one of these.
You're in for a treat. That'll put a camera on you guys. See your face from the first time you see him go around the track.
Do you feel any nerves, any pressure?
No, you guys are here, yeah, but no, not usually.
We're here today to watch Aiden Price. Aiden is 16 years old.
He's still a kid. He's still a kid.
Monday through Thursday, he is driving the simulator for a bunch of different series, including the Cadillac Formula One team. And then on Thursday nights, he flies from Charlotte to Detroit and drives the hour and a half to Ohio, where he races on the dirt track. And that's something that I wanted to explore in this episode. How do we cultivate young American talent? And can we look to Aiden's story as an example of just one of the many different directions you can take your career in as a talented young driver?
It's time to get dirty for 30! Let's freaking race, baby!
These are all racing trophies, or?
Yeah, yep. There's a bunch stored away. They have more in their rooms. They have them everywhere.
What are we looking at?
iRacing simulator.
Boom. Living room. Racing.
Yeah, so they have to deal with me yelling all night.
How much time do you spend on this?
Usually 10 hours, I feel like, a day.
Really?
Yeah. All right, you ready, dude? Yeah.
Never expected to be riding to work with my kid. Definitely weird and different.
Restart, stop shaking.
Thanks, Aiden.
We are here in Charlotte at the simulator. You guys have been here before, but today is a different type of day. Aiden is helping to support the development drivers, Simon and Pietro and Alec, who run this sim professionally for the F1 team.
I can shake down for a driver before he gets in, or I've done tire correlation. I've been called a test dummy before. Yeah, I'm just kind of the random guy. I do random stuff.
There's a lot of work that happens in between, say, having the top level driver or the professional driver in. You're developing the rig, let's say, or you're developing a tire model. Aiden's been a great resource for that, you know, his ability to work with the other engineers. And then also, as we look at Pietro Fittipaldi and Simon Pagano, they've started to trust Aiden's work, and it really just helps them be ahead, which again, they're actually trying to help Sergio and Valtteri be ahead at the racetrack.
Positive day so far is 3 for fruit snacks.
You're on number 3? Okay.
Yeah,
right
I just got out.
Fruit snack counter.
And then we just did Miami. So I beat Simon's lap by 0.04 of a second. So I had to text him to give him a hard time.
Did you text him?
I did text him.
What are his times in comparison to Simon's and Pietro's and even Checo and Valtteri's?
Spot on. Yeah, he's in line with what we would need and what we would expect, which is awesome.
He's a legitimate driver.
Oh yeah.
Were you skeptical the first time he came in?
A little bit, yeah. It was like, he's 15, like what? But getting to work with him, I'm like, okay, I can see it.
No, that's not right.
Alright,
yeah.
Feasible.
I was biked up.
Yeah, there's no way you're driving.
When this program first started, you know, trying to find time to do all of these simulator sessions, looking for drivers and talking to a lot of the other GM drivers, both in Cadillac and Chevrolet.
They sent an email out to all the managers, and I just ignored it when it came out, and Matt immediately came over to my desk and he's like, "Are you gonna respond to this?" And I'm like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Well, Aiden."
Yeah, that's basically the way it worked out, you know. I knew all the driving that Aiden had been doing.
Their other options all wanted like contracts to actually drive the car. And I mean, come on, it just wasn't realistic.
With Aiden, you know, we kind of saw, you know, really that interaction and pleasant to work with. I mean, sometimes being in the simulator can be taxing and some drivers just don't want to do it. His level of intelligence, his level of emotional intelligence dealing with the drivers and other members of the team is exceptional for someone his age. Even when he's not in the simulator, he's here, he's watching, he's listening, he's learning from the other drivers that are in the simulator and showing the work ethic. You know, it makes him a great candidate.
Any comments from that final run you want me to note down?
Braking stability was great. Felt like I didn't really have any oversteer
moments. Obviously, lap time was probably way off.
Yeah, I mean, we're about 2 seconds off where we expect to be, but that's also with obviously upgrades and stuff, like more downforce, which we should have for Qatar, but we should have. Thank you, Aiden.
I knew I'd suck at Qatar. Just more so my part, I'm not quite familiar with those tracks, but you know, look over the data with them and lap time should improve a lot, so. Just need laps.
He's finishing up eating his lunch before, I think they said they got 20 some runs they got to get done.
And then you're driving to Ohio.
Yeah.
Yeah, if I go through Hendrick and put these right like that.
See you guys.
See ya.
What I might do is turn right and go 40 on
Later. Your daddy's gonna make you drive all the way to Ohio tonight.
No.
Yeah. Let's go. Let's get in the car. Come on.
You can have one car, you can drive a normal car.
I hate driving.
No way.
I don't mind it, but I don't like it. It gets boring.
Aiden Price loving this. The youngster flies out front. 2 laps to go. The lead down to a 1.5. Make some noise for the winner. He starts on the pole. How about it for Aiden Price?
I broke my hanger.
For your race, it looked like these weren't straight for just a second. I was like, I'm gonna kill him.
No, I've been wearing them.
Okay.
Wearing them now.
Are you into racing just as much as everybody
I
else?
have to be, don't I? I never had a choice, right? They just, I mean, his first micro that he got, I showed up home and he had it. He didn't ask. He did ask and I said no, and then it just showed up, so. that
Beg
was
for
that.
forgiveness, right?
And Aiden was so excited, so I'm like, how can I take it away from him?
I can.
Yep.
For a 16-year-old, he is super talented. The car control, throttle control, plus the mindset on explaining what the car is doing, he's above and beyond what a 16-year-old should be explaining to me about the car.
Do you think that's because of how he's had the opportunity with GM and Cadillac?
I believe so, yes. Technically, I was retiring. I helped Aiden 3 races at the end of the year. Just was impressed with what he could do. If I can help him get to the next level, that's the goal.
Is that it? Donnie, is that it?
You can climb in once I get this tight.
Yeah. Those are my 2 special edition Haas F1 suits. That was my brother in Formula 2 with Red Bull.
I'm Pietro Fittipaldi. I'm a simulator and development driver for the Cadillac Formula 1 team. I was with Haas for 7 seasons as reserve driver. I started racing NASCAR. From there, I got the sponsorship to go race in Europe. I won the British Formula Renault Championship in 2014, and then the World Series 3.5 Championship in 2017. And after that, that's when I got my chance with the Haas F1 team, and the rest is history. Yeah, I tried making it a big story, but I tried making it shorter.
A sandwich. Got 10 minutes to eat this thing, and then I'm on the sim.
Any feedback so far from everyone?
Some ride comments. The ride is pretty poor, struggling with the rear end of the car, so it's pretty oversteery. So we'll see what the engineers want to try before spring qualifying, see if that helps some of their issues.
Historically, F1 drivers have all come from mostly European karting experience. Will F1 drivers in the future come from the simulator? What is the path for American drivers?
Yeah, I guess it's kind of hard to answer because I think everybody has their own opinion.
It's a good question, probably $1 million question.
Certainly you need both. The simulator will never reproduce the G-forces, the feeling of being on the limit or past the limit, and certainly the racecraft with the other drivers. You know, I think the quest to find an American driver, by not having Formula One in the past, we missed out on a lot of those drivers because their motivation was to be an F1.
A lot of talent in America grows up wanting to be in NASCAR or wanting to be in IndyCar. They spend a lot of time on those tracks because that's what you can afford to go to. You know, flying across the world is very expensive to do racing, as if racing wasn't expensive enough.
Now that we're in F1, you know, it opens up our candidate pool. It's really just being present, maturing the pipeline, you know, going through different candidates and giving them opportunities.
A lot of these seats, you have to prove it right away the first time you jump in the car. So I think that's what makes it tough. Then it's just the willingness to take a gamble on somebody too.
Formula One, it's difficult. There's only 20 seats and like 10 reserve drivers. So to get a chance to race in Formula One is one thing, and then to get a chance to get a full-time ride it's extremely difficult. But I'm very happy with the years I had in Formula One and continue to have. And and to be able to race in Formula One was a big dream come true for me. I think it'd be cool to drive an F1 car.
Obviously, I feel like it's a lot of racers' dreams, but the way I look at it is as long as I can make a living off of racing, I'm happy where I'm at. I mean, I enjoy everything racing, so even if it means I have to be a simulator driver for the rest of my life at GM, I wouldn't complain too much because I'm still racing, right? As long as I'm racing and I'm living happy, that's my goal.
How's it going, Pedro?
It's going. We almost made it into SQ2, which would have been good for the team. Now just waiting on the debrief after qualifying so we can understand where the car was to help us correlate even better now and then start working on some performance stuff for the car for the team tomorrow. We're here till midnight today, so not that bad. We've had some longer night shifts, like the briefing starting now. Okay. See you, man.
So they're about to start the final race of the night. 24 cars. Aiden's starting 14th right now out of about 24, 25 cars. So he's got some ground to make up, but he's got 30 laps to do it. Oh, they're starting to roll. I'm so excited right now to be on the infield of a race like this. Let's do it, guys.
Went off track. You broke the axle? The axle broke on its own. It broke, yeah. For the night. I hate it for you guys because you didn't get to see the whole thing.
Yeah, it's a bummer. Sorry, man.
Oh, it just started falling over on the right front, and I think it was like flexing, but I don't think it fully broke, and then it finally fully broke. Damn.
Does that happen often? Or?
No. I think it's just one of the things where it just happens.
Disappointed?
Yeah, definitely a bummer.
You got another race tomorrow, right?
Yeah. Yep, redeem ourselves tomorrow.
Like I said, the field the kids got it's amazing. It really is. Parts failures happen. Most drivers wouldn't have felt that. They would have went into the next corner and they would have snapped and it would have been bad.
Because Aiden is so technical, he was able to actually perceive that and retire the car before he ever even had to crash and do more damage to the car. So look, I know there are F1 fans out there who are very anti-sim and some who are very pro-sim, but that's a pretty clear argument for working in a simulator. It develops a technical language that drivers, at least today, need to have to give feedback to their teams to improve their car and to improve their own strategy and driving abilities. My takeaway from watching the race tonight versus watching Formula One races is that racing is racing. It's still an opportunity for families, for friends to come to a racetrack together, to enjoy a good time together. And it just honestly made me want to just fly out my own wife and kids out there to enjoy the race with me tonight. And I guess that's what it's all about, right? All right, it's late. I'm dirty. I'm literally covered in dust and sunscreen. I'm gonna go take a shower and go to sleep. I'll see you in the next one.
Bye, squirrels. Do they actually come?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, they're
So I'll
usually
play
waiting.
I'll play Xbox and then you'll see them on the window. It's funny. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Ed.
Nice seeing you guys.